Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff. He is the top Democrat on the House Intel Committee. Good to see you as always, sir.
Thanks, Chris.
Is Steve Bannon coming back today?
Well, he's supposed to come back. Whether he will or not, I can't say. At some point, he's going to have to come back because this broad declaration that I won't answer questions, not just about the transition, but anything that happened after the campaign, including up to the present date, is unsustainable. And so he's going to have to come back. He's going to have to answer questions. And it's interesting what the White House tried to do yesterday through Secretary Kelly, and that is say, well, we never asked him to invoke executive privilege. Now, technically, that's correct. But they did tell him, keep your mouth closed. We don't want you talking about what happened during the transition and what happened while you're in the administration. So a bit of, I think, a misleading impression from those answers yesterday.
Is there any reason other than executive privilege that could be exercised by the White House by suggestion to Bannon for him not to testify?
No. I mean, there's no legal basis at all. Now, executive privilege isn't going to apply to the broad majority of these questions,
right,
even if they do invoke it. But they certainly can't have it both ways, which is what Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Secretary Kelly are trying to do. They're trying to say, we haven't invoked executive privilege, but we are instructing the witness not to answer. And you just can't do that.
Mm. Well, you can unless somebody checks you on it, and that's why we do
exactly.
the job. Now, let me ask you something, though. Why don't you know if Steve Bannon is coming today? He's under subpoena, is he not?
He's under subpoena, but, you know, as is sometimes the case with witnesses that we have compelled to attend, we don't know until we see the whites of their eyes whether they, in fact, show up. And I do want to make one other note of comparison here between Lewandowski and Bannon. It's not just that they refused to answer a question here or a question there. Both of them drew exactly the same line, and I don't think that's a coincidence. We won't answer any questions that took place, conversations, events that took place during the transition or during the administration, and many conversations up to the present day. That's not a coincidence, in my view.
You're saying they used the same exact language?
Well, they drew exactly the same point at which they refused to answer questions.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Let me ask you something. Is there any chance that Bannon is once again communicating with the majority and telling them whether they're going to come today and what the deal is through counsel and you just don't know because you're on the Democrat side?
You know, look, it's certainly possible.
Because that's what happened last time, right? That the majority counsel knew that he wasn't going to answer certain questions and you didn't.
That is true. Now, it may be that many of the majority members didn't know that as well, because you have to understand the staff works for Chairman Nunes, who doesn't participate in these interviews, but does answer to Chairman Nunes. And that's the staff that would have reached any kind of understanding with Steve Bannon's counsel or with the White House. And we are not privy to any of that.
Corey Lewandowski said, I'm not prepared to answer any of these questions. I'll come back. Do you buy that?
No, I don't buy that at all. Of course they're prepared. It would be malpractice for his lawyer to bring him into an investigative hearing and not prepare him for questions and expect somehow the committee is not going to be interested in asking him, what have you learned about the issue of collusion or obstruction of justice since you left the campaign in your conversations with anyone involved in the campaign, your conversations with the president? Of course those questions were anticipated, and of course they were prepared. But what they were prepared to do is say, we're not going to answer. And for some reason, they expected they would have a docile majority to go along with them. And sadly, that's exactly what they had.
Well, but they did different things. I mean, in deference to Bannon, your words I don't say very often, is that, he said, I can answer. I've just been, I've just been asked not to, so I'm going to respect that for now. Let me work with my counsel. Corey Lewandowski said he wasn't prepared. What does that mean? He doesn't remember any of these things? He needs somebody to help him remember what he must obviously know?
Well, it was the same in both respects. Bannon said, hey, I'm willing to answer your questions. I'm just operating on the instructions from the White House. Lewandowski said, I'm willing to answer your questions. I'm just not willing to answer them today. So the reality was both witnesses had the freedom to answer the questions. They were not under any kind of claim of privilege exerted by the executive office. So they both, of their own volition, said, I'm not going to answer. And they both said, I'm not going to answer the same categories of questions. So in the case of Mr. Lewandowski, we tried to find out, was this as a result, did you discuss your testimony with the White House, with the president? He would not answer those questions, and certainly not completely.
Well, you're going to have to see if this continues as a trend. Then we're going to pick up on the conversation we had the last time we spoke, which is you're going to wind up in court, right?
We could. Now, the interesting thing, too, Chris, is that we had another witness in yesterday, a current executive branch official who answered all of our questions, answered questions about campaign transition and current work in the administration. Well, the only way to explain it is the White House is clearly treating Steve Bannon differently, and perhaps Corey Lewandowski the same way. In the case of Steve Bannon, it may be because they can't trust what he's going to say. With these other people in the administration, they know very well exactly what they're going to say. But with Steve Bannon, they don't. And Steve Bannon, of course, may have an interest in getting back in the good graces of the White House, which may explain why he's willing to operate under instructions from the White House.
One mess to the next. What is your vote tonight in the House continuing resolution?
My vote's a no. If we're not going to fix the DACA problem that the president created, we shouldn't be passing this bill. We ought to insist on it. And the Republicans control everything, so they can do it without us. But if they're going to come to us and ask us for our help, we're going to insist on their resolving this mess that the president created and this uncertainty they injected into the lives of hundreds of thousands of these dreamers.
Well, there's political uncertainty also because, sure, they control the House, but with the filibuster rule, they're going to need 60 votes. That's why the Democrats have been drawn into focus. But that's the Senate, not the House. That's not your problem specifically. Congressman, thank you for updating us on what's